You wake up, there's no pillow, no mattress, just a hard floor made of dry clay and a rough linen blanket that barely protects you from the chill that still lingers from the desert night in Egypt. You don't know where you are, but within a few minutes you'll understand. You're in the heart of ancient Egypt, more precisely around the year 1290 BC, during the reign of Ramses II, one of the most powerful pharaohs of the 19th dynasty. The smell hits you first. It's a mix of wood smoke, dust, human sweat, and excrement. Life in ancient Egypt, even for someone of lower middle class, a craftsman, peasant, or servant, was tough. But you, coming from the 21st century, will soon find out that even the privileged didn't live in comfort anything close to what you know. Your body aches. And not just from the clay bed. It's because, to survive here, you'll have to work. A lot. And with a diet that barely supports the effort. You hear the call, a short authoritative shout. A man with a shaved head and a light linen kilt stares at you. He's a supervisor. You are a laborer, a mason's assistant on the construction of a temple, maybe in Luxor, maybe in Karnak. It doesn't matter. Your role is decided. He hands you a stone tool, a rudimentary hoe, and points to a pile of stones that need to be dragged, by hand or with ropes and wooden rollers, under the scorching sun that is about to rise. You're hungry. But breakfast is simple. A bowl of farro, a type of grain, a piece of onion and some weak beer. More of a fermented soup than an alcoholic drink. This beer is what workers consume the most. Not for pleasure, but because the water is usually contaminated. And even then many still suffer from intestinal diseases. The sun rises quickly. The heat is brutal, and you have no protection. The linen covering your body is thin, but not enough. You feel your skin burning. There's no sunscreen, no sunglasses. Just sand, sweat, and orders. Time moves slowly. Hours drag on as you push stones with other men. Each stone weighs over 200 pounds. There are papyrus ropes, and you nearly lose your fingers when they slip. A scream of pain echoes from a coworker. A nasty injury, but no one stops. Work cannot stop. The punishment for slowness might be a public beating, or the loss of your daily ration. You start to feel thirsty, and hungry again. But lunch only comes in the mid-afternoon. More hard bread, a lentil paste, and maybe a piece of dried fish if you're lucky. You look up at the sky. The sun seems to mock you. And around you, the city pulses with sounds and smells from a time you don't fully understand. Women carry water jars on their heads. Children run barefoot. Vendors shout on corners. Everyone follows a harsh routine, dictated by religion and obedience to the pharaoh, considered a living god. You, a stranger in this world, begin to realize the true challenge. It's not just about surviving physically. It's about mentally withstanding the breakdown of modern reality, the strict rules, the brutality hidden behind the beautiful papyri and monuments you once saw in books. And the day isn't even halfway through yet. Blood, sun, and beer. The sun of ancient Egypt wasn't just hot. It was merciless. A silent tyrant that ruled the rhythm of life like the pharaoh himself. By noon you already feel your feet burning inside your rudimentary sandals made of woven fibers. The soles are so thin that every stone on the ground feels like it's cutting into your skin. Your body is on the verge of collapse. You're not used to the physical workload, much less the sanitary conditions, poor diet, or constant oversight of the foreman. They yell in Middle Egyptian, a language that sounds harsh, rhythmic, incomprehensible to you. But the tone is universal. Hurry, command, threat. You see blood. Not yours. Yet but another worker's. He fell on a stone, his face split open. One of the supervisors just watches. No first aid, no compress, no break. Another man is called in to replace him, like a cog in a machine that cannot stop. You want to stop, but you can't. Religious constructions, temples, tombs, smaller pyramids, were sacred projects. Building them was a duty for the people, but above all, it was an obligation to the gods. Stopping work meant not only disobeying your superiors, but offending Ma'at, the cosmic order that sustained the entire Egyptian universe. Breaking Mot could be punished with whipping or food ration cuts. Yes, food was rationed. And at this point, you begin to understand one of the pillars of ancient Egyptian society: beer. But don't be fooled. Egyptian beer wasn't the golden, frothy drink you know. It was thick, opaque, made from fermented bread. Often it contained poorly ground grains, bits of straw, and impurities. It wasn't consumed for pleasure, but out of necessity, a safe way to ingest liquids when water was contaminated by waste or bacteria from the Nile. You drink and wince. The taste is sour, strange, slightly rancid, but at least it's cool. Someone shouts your name, or the name they gave you here, and you return to work. In the afternoon, the heat doesn't let up. You feel your temples throbbing. Sweat pours into your eyes like rivers. You have no sunscreen, no hat, no shade. Your clothes stick to your body, and you notice that almost everyone around you has signs of skin diseases: spots, open sores, dry scabs. Hygiene, despite the Nile baths, is poor. The ancient Egyptians valued cleanliness, but were at the mercy of the environment. You start scratching your arms, insect bites that might very well carry deadly diseases. You hear talk of something that chills you: Nile fever, mosquito virus, intestinal worms. Illnesses here are ruthless. No antibiotics, no anesthesia, no vaccines. A simple tooth infection can be a death sentence. A poorly treated cut can turn gangrenous in a few days. Doctors exist, but they're far away, in temples, serving the nobility or scribes. You feel a pang in your stomach. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe the dried fish from lunch. Maybe the start of something much worse. There are no hospitals, no pharmacies, just herbs, spells, and hope in the gods. Time trickles by like the sweat down your neck. A scribe appears, dressed in fine clothes, carrying an ink palette and a reed staff. He watches. He writes. You realize he's recording names, shifts, production. The scribes were the literate elite of ancient Egypt. They mastered the sacred art of hieroglyphic writing. Most of the population, including you, is illiterate. You don't know what's being written, whether it's good or bad, but you feel the power of that man who doesn't carry stones, who doesn't sweat under the sun, who just watches and writes. There, for the first time in the day, you understand the weight of the Egyptian hierarchy. A society where birth determines everything, where you are a laborer until the end, and the end, here, usually comes early. Break time finally arrives. You sit in a shady corner, finally, near a partially built wall. The ground is hot, but you no longer care. Your muscles tremble, your stomach growls, your eyes burn. You think of home in the 21st century, of a shower, of cold water, of clean food, of painkillers, of rest. But that luxury is more than 3,000 years away, and the sun still hasn't set. Night in ancient Egypt brings other dangers, and you're about to find out in the next part. When the sun falls, the gods awaken. The day in ancient Egypt, under the merciless sun, was already an almost unbearable challenge. But night brings its own horrors. When the sun disappears behind the golden dunes, the temperature drops rapidly. What was unbearable heat becomes a piercing cold that sinks into your bones. You're sweaty, exhausted, and without proper protection. The thin linen that clothed you during the day is now just a scrap of fabric that barely shields you from the icy drafts. In the vast empire of the pharaoh, even under the ever-watchful eyes of overseers and guards, hope still pulsed in the hearts of the oppressed workers. Brutal lives and severe punishments fueled a silent thirst for freedom and justice, a flame that refused to die. But resisting in ancient Egypt was a deadly gamble. Those who dared to defy the system faced merciless consequences, rebellions and uprisings. Ancient stories tell of workers who, weary of cruelty and exploitation, rose up against the oppression. Some of these revolts were planned in secret, small groups conspiring to flee or sabotage the construction of the great monuments. But these uprisings were crushed with brutal efficiency. Overseers with their whips and armed soldiers did not hesitate to use lethal force. Extreme punishments were turned into public warnings. The severed head of a rebel displayed for all to see, a message carved in terror. And yet, some still dared. Workers, pushed to their breaking point, would escape into the night, crossing the desert with no clear destination, only a desperate hope to live unshackled by a merciless empire. Many died on the way, from thirst, wild animals, or desert patrols hunting for runaways. A few disappeared into distant villages, adopting new identities, living in fear of discovery. Escaping Pharaoh's labor was considered treason against the gods, and the punishment went beyond death. It was erasure, the deletion of one's name, eternal oblivion. The greatest curse for an Egyptian who believed that to be forgotten was to truly die forever. That's why many chose silent resistance. Small acts of defiance became a language of survival. Broken tools, miscalculated work, whispered prayers against the gods of power. It was a quiet war, one without weapons, but full of hidden bravery. This unseen rebellion, though invisible to the eyes of the elite, was the only way for some to preserve their dignity. In hidden taverns across villages, whispers of injustice spread like wildfire. Stories of corrupt scribes who forged records, of guards who abused their power, of priests who manipulated fear to rule. The system seemed unbreakable, but it was deeply human, and therefore deeply flawed. Punishment for disobedience was harsh. But what if the mistake was within the system itself? What if innocent lives were destroyed by false accusations or biased judgments? You begin to see that Ma'at, the so-called cosmic order, was more fragile than the priests claimed. Justice depended on who enforced it, and not all hands were clean. In the end, law in ancient Egypt was a double-edged sword, a tool of control and a sacred ideal. People feared earthly punishment, but they feared the afterlife even more. Because for Egyptians, true justice didn't belong to the pharaoh, it belonged to Osiris. In the Hall of Judgment, every soul would be weighed, every truth revealed. And that leads us to the next chapter, where we will explore what truly awaited the soul after death, the trial of Osiris, the weighing of the heart, the book of the dead, and the sacred journey toward eternal paradise, or total annihilation. Coming up next, the judgment of Osiris, weighing the heart and the eternal afterlife, escapes and life on the margins. For some, fleeing was the only way out. Many workers tried to escape during the night, taking advantage of the darkness to hide in the dunes in the swamps of the Nile Delta, or in the riverside forests. Escape, however, was a desperate act, full of dangers. Not knowing the terrain, the hunger, the thirst, the pursuit by guards, and the severe punishment if caught, all of this turned escape into a life-threatening risk. But for those who managed to survive, life outside the pharaonic system was harsh, yet free. They joined small groups living off hunting, fishing, and rudimentary farming, always afraid of being hunted down and captured. Justice for the rebels. Those who were caught faced a terrible fate. In addition to physical punishments, many were subjected to even harder and crueler labor as punishment. In some cases, the rebels were taken to underground prisons or sent to forced labor in remote regions, far from the protection of any benevolent authority. The fame of the pharaoh's justice was accompanied by deep fear, and this relentless repression ensured the empire's stability for a long time. But at the cost of great suffering. The shadow of hope. Despite the fear, there were stories of small victories, tales of workers who managed to escape, who built solidarity networks within villages, or who found ways to negotiate slightly better conditions. Faith in the gods also fueled hope. Many believed that one day divine justice would prevail, that Ma'at would truly be restored, and that the suffering people would find relief. This chapter reveals the human side of the struggle for survival, not only resisting physical conditions, but facing tyranny and seeking freedom, even when fully aware of the risks. Diseases, medicine, and mysticism, the fight for life in ancient Egypt. Surviving a day in ancient Egypt didn't just mean escaping the scorching heat, the exhausting labor, and the harsh punishments. There was a constant, invisible enemy that threatened everyone's life: disease. The lack of modern scientific knowledge and the unsanitary conditions created the perfect setting for epidemics and illnesses that devastated villages and construction sites. The reality of diseases. The most common diseases were those linked to contaminated water, poor hygiene, and the constant proximity among workers. Skin infections, open wounds that wouldn't heal, respiratory illnesses caused by dust, and the toll of intense physical exertion were widespread. Diseases like malaria, spread by the abundant mosquitoes in the Nile Delta, were a constant threat, alongside intestinal and parasitic infections. Foot wounds, caused by constant contact with the hot, dirty ground, often became infected, turning simple cuts into life-threatening dangers. You see many workers limping with open sores and pustules, and you know that the available medicine is limited and rudimentary. Egyptian medicine. On the other hand, ancient Egypt had a surprisingly advanced medical system for its time, blending empirical knowledge, religious rituals, and the use of medicinal plants. Doctors, known as SWNW, used a combination of herbal remedies, ointments, massages, and even simple surgeries to treat wounds and illnesses. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the world's oldest medical documents, contains treatments for various ailments, including spells meant to ward off evil spirits believed to cause diseases. Medicine and mysticism. An essential duo. Medicine and mysticism went hand in hand. To the Egyptians, disease wasn't just a physical issue, but also a spiritual one. They believed that demons and evil spirits could cause sickness, and that the gods needed to be appeased. Priest-doctors performed rituals and incantations, using amulets and invocations to protect the sick. They were also intermediaries between the earthly and the divine, seeking cures for both body and soul. The weight of vulnerability. For you, a worker, this meant each day carried the risk of illness that could rob you of your ability to work. Or worse, your life. There were no sick leaves, no support for the ill. If you fell sick, your family was left helpless, and the risk of being replaced was very real. Moreover, life expectancy was short, with many children and adults dying prematurely from preventable diseases. The resilience of the human spirit. Even amid such a brutal reality, humanity endured. Medical practices, rituals, and faith offered a glimmer of hope. You see how the community gathers to care for the sick, even with limited resources. There are moments of solidarity amid the harshness of daily life. Mysticism was more than belief. It was a vital force that helped people endure pain and fear. Reflection. In this scenario, survival wasn't just physical. It was also emotional and spiritual. Ancient Egypt was a land where body, mind, and spirit fought together for survival, and where the mystery of life and death was ever present. Hunger and hope, the struggle for food in ancient Egypt. Imagine waking up before the sun rises, your stomach already empty. You feel the scratchiness of straw beneath your body, stand up with aching bones and a dry throat. Before even touching a tool, hunger is already your shadow. In ancient Egypt, food wasn't a guaranteed right. It was an unstable blessing, as subject to the weather, the gods, and the pharaoh's orders as any other part of life. The worker's diet. For the elite, feasts with meats, sweets, and filtered beer were common. But for you, an ordinary worker, the reality was far more modest. Bread, onions, garlic, lentils, and if you were lucky, a bit of dried fish from the Nile, and only if there was food at all. Bread was the cornerstone of the diet, but it was hard, poorly fermented, and often mixed with sand by accident, which, over time, destroyed your teeth. The beer was thicker than today's, almost a fermented porridge. It served to both quench thirst and provide sustenance. And when the harvest failed or the boats were delayed, hunger knocked hard at the door. The price of hunger. Hunger in ancient Egypt wasn't just discomfort. It was a silent death sentence. Sick or malnourished workers were disposable. Production could not stop. In times of drought, when the Nile did not flood as expected, the fields turned to dust, granaries emptied, and villages felt the impact first. Grain was rationed, and overseers decided who ate and who didn't. You watch mothers diluting flour and water to feed 3 children with what barely fed one, elders giving up their share for the young, and whispers of revolt began to rise, always silenced by the promise that the gods will provide. Food as control. The Egyptian state used food as a form of domination. Grains were stored in royal granaries and only released by order of the authorities. Workers received rations as payment. To work meant to eat. Not working meant going hungry. If you fell ill, the ration stopped. If you protested, you could lose everything. Eating was directly linked to obedience. The bread and beer ration was measured in hekat and deben, units that could vary according to the mood of the administrator. One mistake, one misplaced complaint, and you would receive less, or nothing. Rituals and superstitions. In the absence of concrete solutions, people turned to the gods. Priests conducted rituals asking for fertile soil, abundant harvests, and mercy during the Nile's floods. You see families offering dried fish at altars, burning incense and reciting prayers before small statues of Osiris and Isis. Faith was as nourishing as food. It sustained the spirit where the body failed. A forbidden feast. One night, exhausted and starving after 16 hours of labor, you hear whispers in the village. A group is planning to raid a grain store hidden by the administrators. The plan is simple. Get in, take what's needed, and vanish before sunrise. It's dangerous. If caught, the punishment will be public: flogging, imprisonment, or even death. You hesitate, but the memory of your child's growling stomach changes your decision. Hunger, at that moment, speaks louder than fear. Reflection. In ancient Egypt, surviving hunger was a daily victory. Food was struggle, sacrifice, politics, and faith. And if you, a time traveler, tried to live even one day in that reality, your body might endure, but your spirit, that would be tested to the limit. As the setting sun paints the Nile in molten gold, you hear chants rising from the temples. Incense burns in ceramic urns, and priests invoke ancient names in languages that sound like whispers from the desert itself. Night falls over ancient Egypt, but the day never ends for the gods. And for mortals, death is only the beginning. Religion as the architecture of the world. In ancient Egypt, religion wasn't part of life. It was life. From the humblest farmer to the pharaoh himself, every act, eating, planting, marrying, building, carried a divine purpose. The Egyptian gods weren't distant. They walked among men. Bastet could protect your home from rats. Horus saw everything from the sky. Anubis guarded the dead. And the pharaoh? He was the living link between heaven and earth, a god in flesh and bone. You observe your fellow workers performing small morning rituals, touches to amulets, whispered words to clay statues, offerings of bread to idols. No one starts the day without asking the gods for protection. The weight of death. In this sacred world, death was not viewed with horror. It was feared, yes, but also revered. After all, dying meant crossing into a new realm. But there was a problem. The afterlife was not guaranteed. To reach the field of reeds, a kind of Egyptian paradise where labor was light, fields always fertile, and food abundant, one had to pass the judgment of Osiris. In this spiritual court, your heart would be weighed on a scale against the feather of truth, Ma'at. If the heart was light, you were worthy. But if it was heavy with sin, the devouring creature Ammit, part crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, would destroy it forever. No salvation, no reincarnation, just oblivion. The fear of the nameless. For the poor and laborers like you, the greatest fear wasn't pain. It was dying without being remembered. To have a tomb with your name, an offering with your stele, someone to say your name in a funerary ritual, that was essential. Forgetting was the second death. That's why many kept amulets with their names inscribed. even if poorly written. Others hid clay tablets with their prayers etched into them, hoping someone would read them someday. Anything to ensure that, even in death, you would still exist. Burials and the privilege of the dead, but full funerary rituals were expensive. Elaborate mummies, coffins painted with spells, canopic jars, all were luxuries for nobles and scribes. For workers, the reality was different. Humble cloths, shallow graves, when time and permission allowed. Many were buried in haste in common areas without names, magical protection, or a chance to defend themselves in the spiritual world. You saw a fellow worker fall ill and die the next day. His body was taken without ceremony, placed beneath hard sand, with a small stone marking the spot. Not even his name was recorded. And you feel a chill. Will you be forgotten too? The power of the invisible. And even in the face of that, faith remains. It's not just obedience, it's hope. You witness a simple man chanting a prayer to the goddess Isis while holding the hand of his dying wife. A boy places dried flowers on an improvised altar, asking that his father, who died in a work accident, pass the judgment. In poverty, faith blooms. In silence, it echoes. Reflection. In ancient Egypt, life was brief, but death was eternal. The true challenge wasn't just surviving the heat, the labor, the hunger, but ensuring that when you died, you weren't erased from the universe. And if you, a modern outsider, thought death would bring rest, in ancient Egypt it is after death that the greatest judgment begins. Ma'at, the divine order. At the center of the Egyptian world is the concept of Ma'at, cosmic order, truth, balance. It's not just a principle, it's a goddess with a feather on her head, representing universal harmony. To violate Ma'at was to violate the fabric of reality itself. Not paying taxes, stealing, lying, blaspheming, all were considered not just crimes, but disruptions that threatened all of Egypt. That's why the state responded with an iron hand. The pharaoh was seen as the defender of this order, and his authority came from the gods. To question him, directly or indirectly, was a celestial offense. Justice as spectacle. You watch as the prisoner is dragged out. A man you recognize. Quiet, thin, father of two. Accused of stealing grain from the royal reserve. They say it was only 2 handfuls. But in ancient Egypt, a small crime was never treated as a small matter. The trial is brief, often symbolic. There are no lawyers, only scribes, judges, and guards. The word of an official carries more weight than that of a worker. And there are always witnesses ready to accuse, hoping for rewards or favors. He is found guilty. The punishment? 100 public lashes, and the loss of ration rights for a month. In practice, a sentence of starvation. You want to look away, but you can't. Everyone must watch. One man's pain is meant to remind the others of the price of breaking the order. The forms of punishment. In ancient Egypt, punishment varied by social status, the crime, and the mood of the authorities. Lashes were common for minor offenses. Mutilations, like cutting off the nose or tongue, were used for liars or traitors. Exile in the desert was a cruel sentence, a slow form of execution. Penal slavery. The condemned were sent to copper mines where few survived more than 6 months. Public execution was rare, but occurred when a crime directly threatened the state. But there was one punishment feared more than all: erasure. The worst punishment: to be forgotten. In certain cases, the pharaoh would order the name of a criminal to be removed from all records. Statues destroyed, tombs violated, inscriptions erased. As if the person had never existed. It was absolute death, in body, soul, and memory. No name, no offerings, no judgment by Osiris. Only oblivion. You hear whispers that a supervisor has fallen from grace. Once a favorite of the Temple of Thebes, he was accused of betraying trust by embezzling gold. Within days, his statues vanished, his records were erased, his name turned to silence. Even his friends treat him like a ghost. Justice or fear? You begin to wonder, does the system seek justice or just control? Egyptian laws did exist, yes, and there were even codes of conduct. But in practice, everything depended on the balance of power. The trial was often a performance to reinforce fear and keep the social pyramid intact. Obedience was survival, and even innocence was no guarantee of safety. Reflection. In ancient Egypt, order was revered above compassion. The stability of the empire mattered more than the life of a man. Justice was what kept others afraid. And if you think that by following the rules you would be safe, remember, in the desert, even the shadow of doubt can cost you everything. The heat finally begins to ease. The last golden rays of the sun fade behind distant palm trees. You still feel the weight of dust in your eyes, screams in your ears, pain in your bones. But now, something changes. The silence. And in it, you listen, not with your ears but with your soul, to the whisper from beyond. Because in ancient Egypt, the end of the day can be the end of life. And here, dying is not simply stopping breathing. It is the start of another trial. You have died. And now you must face something even more terrible than existence itself. The judgment of Osiris. The journey through the underworld. According to the Egyptians, death was not an end, but a crossing. The soul, the Ba, had to make a long journey through the dangers of the Duat, the realm of the dead, full of lakes of fire, deformed creatures and gods with multiple heads. You are no longer among the living. You float in an invisible boat, guided by silent ferrymen. Around you liquid darkness. Above, stars spinning in impossible spirals. Ahead, the Hall of Two Truths. The fate of your soul will be decided now. The eternal court you are led by Anubis, the jackal-headed god. He says nothing, he only points. You enter a hall where 42 gods sit on thrones, they all watch you. Each represents a moral law. Each is judge of a part of your life. You feel small, naked, not only in body, but in essence, because here you will be judged for everything, including what you hid from yourself. The scale of truth. In the center of the hall is Mat's scale. On one side, your heart. On the other, a white feather, symbol of truth. The scribe Thoth prepares the records. Osiris watches silently, and then the confession begins. The negative confession you must say, one by one, the 42 sacred denials. I have not killed, I have not stolen, I have not been dishonest, I have not lied, I have not abused power, I have not caused pain, I have not blasphemed, I have not let the hungry go hungry. Each denial is like a mirror, each phrase, a knife. But can you truly deny them all? Remember the man you pushed to keep your bread ration? The woman you ignored while she was beaten in the market? The slave you saw die of exhaustion and turned your face away? The heart weighs. Literally. When the heart betrays in ancient Egypt, it was believed the heart held the memory of all your deeds. It was your true conscience. If your actions were good, the heart would be light. If they were bad, heavy. And if it weighs more than the feather? You already know the answer. The devourer of souls. The scale tips. Anubis does not move a muscle. Thoth records the verdict. Osiris does not need to speak. From the back of the room emerges Ammit, the devourer. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. The sacred monster of eternal condemnation. If your heart is heavier than the feather, Ammit devours it. And with it, your entire soul. No heaven, no hell, only oblivion. The second death, the true one. You are not ready. You try to argue. But here, words do not matter. Only the life you lived. On your brief journey through Egypt, you were afraid, gave in to violence, ignored the suffering of others. You were only human, and that here may not be enough. Because Egypt judges not only what you did, but what you failed to do. The silence before injustice, the omission, the cowardice. All of this weighs, and the weight is real. A mirror for the present. The most terrifying thing about the Egyptian judgment is not the mythology. It is the fact that they understood that every human being carries within themselves their own judge. In the modern world, you hide behind excuses. Not here. In ancient Egypt, everything is clear, cruelly clear. And what truly kills you is what was already inside you. You would not survive, because even if the body endured, the heart would not lie. Did you think Egyptian justice was like ours? That there would be fair trials, full investigations, defense evidence? Not here. In ancient Egypt, justice was swift and ruthless. Often, one accusation was enough, or simply the fact that someone more powerful wanted you silenced. Justice here does not serve truth. It serves the pharaoh. It serves the temple. It serves order. And order demands pain. The whip speaks first. Imagine you were accused of theft. Maybe a bowl. Maybe a piece of linen you found on the street, it doesn't matter. A guard saw it or someone denounced you. Before you say a word, your wrists are tied. You will be interrogated with a whip. Yes, this was common practice. Confession only counts if it comes with blood. If you don't confess, you get more pain. Until you confess. Even if you are innocent. Pain makes anyone admit to what they did not do. Blindness as punishment. The penalty for forging documents or lying under oath was not prison. It was blindness, not symbolic, literal. A wooden rod heated by fire was pressed against the eyes of the condemned. The man fell screaming, and the guards just said, "Now, he will see no more lies." Justice or brutality? In Egypt, the two went hand in hand. Amputation, a reminder. Stole, lose your hand. Desecrated a tomb, cut out the tongue. Had sex with a married woman, castration. Egyptian punishments were didactic, made so others would see and remember. And those who enforced the punishments did not hesitate, because for them justice was not just correction, it was spectacle. Punishment was public lesson. Punishments for women, always more cruel. If a woman was caught in adultery, the consequences varied. But shame was guaranteed. Her hair could be shaved, a public humiliation, or dragged through the city. Some were taken to temples for purification, which in practice was abuse disguised as ritual. Sometimes the penalty was death. Not immediate, but slow in isolation, hunger, or ritual drowning. In Egypt, a woman was property, and when she damaged her value, she was discarded. Slaves, no rights, no voice. And the enslaved, they had no trial. Suspicion was enough. If a slave failed, whether by mistake, disobedience, or exhaustion, they were whipped until they no longer breathed. The body was often thrown into the desert as a warning to others. They were not people, they were tools. And broken tools did not go to court. They went to the trash. Justice for the rich. A joke. If a noble committed a crime, things changed. Instead of torture, there was bribery. Instead of punishment, symbolic exile. Some were sent to other regions as punishment, but still lived in mansions. The scale of justice was clear, heavier for the poor, lighter for the powerful. The heart of the law was not matte, it was gold, silence as sentence. Many crimes were never judged. They vanished. You saw someone taken away, then nothing. No body. No explanation, only emptiness and fear. Absence was an invisible punishment, a message to the living. Do not challenge the system. Do not ask too much. Reflection. In ancient Egypt, survival was more than eating and drinking. It was navigating a system where a wrong look could condemn you, where silence was safer than truth, where justice was just another form of control. You would not survive because you still believe you can defend yourself, that there is logic, that there is mercy. But here, the law is a scythe, and those who hold the handle do not look you in the eyes. You wake up to the smell of incense, but not the gentle kind from a temple. It is strong, bitter, mixed with what smells like iron, blood. Something is being prepared, and it is not just any ceremony. Today there is sacrifice, and you, even unwillingly, are a witness. The gods demand Egypt was deeply religious. The gods were not just symbols, they were active beings, with wills, fears, desires. If the Nile floods were late, it was because Hapi was angry. If there was plague, it was Bastet turned against her people, and to appease them, something had to die. Sacrifices were common, animals most of the time, but not only. Blood on the altar. A white ox, spotless, is brought forward. It is carefully examined. One small flaw, and it's no good. But this one is perfect. The crowd kneels. The priests chant. One of them, with an obsidian blade, cuts the animal's throat. Blood gushes into a ceramic vessel. It is poured over the altar. Some splashes hit his face. No one cleans it. Blood of offering is blessing. Were humans offered too? Officially, the Egyptians did not practice human sacrifice frequently, but archaeology tells another story. Mass graves with bodies arranged around nobles, young women with broken bones, servants buried alive to accompany their masters in death. They called it eternal service. They believed the dead would need company and protection in the afterlife, and nothing was more effective than the living turned into dead for this. Priests, the true owners of faith. The priests were not humble monks. They were elite, rich, well-fed, politically powerful. They decided what the gods wanted, and whoever challenged them was not just challenging a cult, they were challenging an entire system. In Egypt, faith was power, and blood was its currency. Rituals of purifications or torture? Some rituals required the initiate to go days without eating, without sleeping, isolated in dark crypts. They said it purified the spirit. But the truth? It broke the body. Many went insane. Others died. And those who survived believed in everything because they needed to justify the suffering. What begins as ritual ends as trauma. You are not safe. You, foreigner, nameless, without role, start to attract attention. What if someone suggests you would make a good offering? A foreigner without owner, without home. The gods accept. And here, no one would save you. You are sick. The fever consumes you, your eyes burn. Your stomach feels like it's about to turn inside out. You seek help. You enter a healing house. But the smell that greets you is not medicine. It is sweat, flesh, mold. In ancient Egypt, being sick was an uncertain sentence. Medicine was a mix of science and magic. Sometimes it helped. Many times it killed faster. Doctors or magicians. The SW&W, Egyptian doctors, used papyri with hundreds of recipes, ointments, infusions, bloodletting. They knew about the heart, liver, intestines, but they also used spells. Every disease had, according to them, a spiritual cause, a demon, a curse, a ghost of envy. If you coughed blood, you received not only herbs, but enchantments murmured on your forehead. Surgeries without relief. If you had an abscess, the solution was to cut it with a copper knife, without anesthesia, only with bindings and a stone to bite. You screamed, blood poured out, and if you were strong, you survived. If not, you were buried as purified. Infections? No chance. There were no antibiotics. The smallest infection could kill. A badly treated cut became a sentence. Many died from simple things. A thorn, a bite, an inflamed tooth. In Egypt, life hung by a fragile thread. And medicine was a gamble. Insects rot and slow death. The hygiene that never existed. The sun still shines in the sky, but you feel something around you is rotting. The smell doesn't come from a specific place. It comes from everywhere. From the ground, From the cracked mud walls, from sweaty skins, from bodies that live, work, and die without pause. You are used to seeing death around every corner. But now, you begin to understand it for real. Because here in ancient Egypt, the greatest threat to your life may be something small, invisible, something crawling under doors, flying over bread, hiding in folds of linen, something that understands no mercy, no hierarchy, no prayer. Insects, worms, bacteria. When bathing does not save, you may have read somewhere that the Egyptians bathed. And yes, it's true. Nobles used jars of perfumed water, rubbed their bodies with natron and oils. But you are not noble. You are a peasant or worse, a foreigner without class. Your water comes from the Nile, a sacred river, but also the largest open sewer of civilization. People spit in the Nile, defecate on its banks, wash dead animals, clean bloody clothes, and that same water goes into the jar you drink from. You are not purifying yourself. You are contaminating yourself, one sip at a time. Flies. The true plagues of Egypt. They are everywhere. On the sweat of children. On the wounds of animals. In the eyes of the elderly. Carrying eggs, germs, larvae. You try to shoo them with your hand, but they come back. Always come back. And when you sleep, you don't notice. They land in your mouth, on your mucous membranes. They deposit more than annoyance. They deposit disease. Think about that. Flies were so problematic that the Egyptians worshipped a god named Khepri, with the head of a scarab beetle, symbol of renewal. But even the deity could not stop the hollow insect from carrying death wherever it went. Parasites. The enemy within your belly starts to hurt. You think it's hunger, but it's not. It's something moving inside you. The Egyptians knew there were serpents invisible that lived in the belly. They called them demons of the intestines, but they didn't know they were worms, tapeworms, roundworms, eating raw fish, drinking dirty water, walking barefoot through animal feces, all normal. Soon your eyes start to yellow. You feel tired all the time. Your body loses weight, but your belly swells. A doctor applies mud mixed with garlic on your skin. He says it will cure you. But you only get worse. You are dying inside. Wounds that never close. You cut yourself carrying stones for an official's house. A small scratch on the leg. In the modern world, a bandage would suffice. Here, there is none of that. The cut gets infected, swells. The skin around turns black. Pus flows nonstop. And the smell. You begin to walk with difficulty. The fever rises. Others move away. No one wants to catch the flesh plague. A priest suggests you were cursed for touching a profane amulet. No medicine. No chance. You will die from a scratch. Dirty clothes. Unhappy bodies. Your clothes are stiffened with your own sweat. You wash them when you can, but soap does not exist. You use ashes, sand, fermented urine. None of it really removes the larvae living in the seams or the lice hiding in the folds of the tunic. At night, you scratch your head until you tear pieces of scalp off. During the day, you feel tingling under the skin, maybe scabies, maybe not. You feel ashamed. But no one around you is better. The dirt here is not an exception. It is the norm. And perfume? The Egyptians were known for their perfumes, oils, and essences. But these luxuries were for the few. You might smell myrrh oil once a year if called to a festival. The rest of the time, the perfume you smell is a mix of urine, feces, dried blood, sweat, and old fish from the market. It is the smell of the city. And there is no escape. Too many dead. Too few tombs with the population growing and tombs being dug every week. Not everyone has a place to rest. Some bodies are buried in mass graves near the houses. Others are left in shallow caves. Jackals sniff around. Larvae feed. And the wind carries the smell of decomposition to you. You have dinner breathing in the breath of death. The normalization of disgust. The scariest thing of all? You get used to it. After weeks, the worms no longer scare you. You sleep to the sound of rats. You step on feces without noticing. You use the same water to clean wounds and wash dishes. You accept the unbearable because there is no alternative. And without realizing it, you start dying inside, rotting from within before your body gives up. Reflection. In ancient Egypt, hygiene was not just scarce, it was a luxury. Death came from all sides, but sometimes it began in the quietest place, your own body. You wouldn't survive because you live in a world where antibiotics, soap, bathrooms, and treated sewage are invisible, yet essential. Here, without all that, you wouldn't last a week. And it wouldn't be a crocodile or a pharaoh to kill you. It would be a fly. The religion that controls everything, and the curse of not understanding the gods. You believed religion was a choice, a spiritual practice, maybe a consolation for the weak. But here, in ancient Egypt, you discover religion is the very social oxygen. It's what unites, what separates, what punishes, and what protects. You are immersed in a world where every gesture, every word, every death, and every harvest is a negotiation with the gods. And the worst, you don't speak their language. Thousands of gods, and all demand something. You've heard of Ra, the sun god. But you didn't know he travels every day across the sky and, at night, descends to the underworld to fight the serpent Apophis, who threatens to swallow existence. If Ra loses, the world ends. Literally. So yes, there are ceremonies, prayers, and rituals to ensure the sun returns tomorrow. But Ra is far from the only one. There are gods with the heads of falcons, jackals, ibises, lionesses, cats, crocodiles, hippopotamuses, all with their own wills, interwoven stories, conflicting myths. You don't know which offerings please Horus, nor which amulet wards off Sekhmet when she comes as a plague. You don't even know that stepping on a scarab beetle can be sacrilege. And then, everything starts going wrong. The priests command more than the king. The pharaoh is the intermediary between the divine and the earthly. But he doesn't know how to perform the rituals. Those who hold the knowledge are the priests. They live in isolation, fed by the peasants' grain, dressed in pure linen, shaved every day. They are treated like saints but act like spiritual bankers. Are you sick? You need the priest of Imhotep. Your child is born? Seek the scribe of Hathor. Traveling? Offer something to Taweret, goddess of protection. But everything costs time, goods, loyalty. You don't understand the chants, don't read the hieroglyphs, don't know how to purify yourself. And that makes you dangerous. Profane. A ritual mistake can be fatal. You follow a procession to the temple of Anubis. You want to understand. But unknowingly, you enter barefoot where you shouldn't. A guardian sees you and shouts. 2 men grab you, shave your head, put a lead necklace on your neck, and drag you outside the city. You are exiled because you profaned the path of the dead. There was no trial, only the sacred sentence. The invisible world is always watching you pass by a field and hear a scream. A young man writhes on the ground. They say he is possessed by a spirit. A woman throws salted water. Another burns papyri with invocations. You laugh inside. But at night the same scream echoes near your hut. You wake with marks on your arm, fine cuts like from a fingernail. You remember nothing, but neighbors already look at you as cursed. The soul needs more care than the body. In Egypt, death is not the end. It's the beginning of judgment. If your heart is not light as the feather of Mut, it will be devoured by Amit, the creature half crocodile, half lion, half hippopotamus. But for that, you need to be properly mummified, buried with the right objects, name pronounced in rituals, soul divided between Ba and Ka. If they fail in any part, you are lost forever. And guess what? You are a foreigner, an intruder. No one will embalm you. Your body will rot in some corner and your soul will wander eternally as a corrupted Ak, a tormented spirit. There is no way to live without faith, and no way to survive with the wrong faith you begin to try to understand. To make offerings, learn magical words, start attending ceremonies, But everything still feels like a closed game. Because it's not enough to worship the gods, you need to be accepted by them. And you are not. When you thought of ancient Egypt, you might have imagined cats sitting on queens' laps, majestic sphinxes, and tamed crocodiles. But now, walking through this world, you understand. The animals here are not just creatures. They are symbols. They are threats. They are gods. And often they are predators. Cats, the untouchables. You see a cat cross the dirt road. People stop. Some kneel. A woman offers dried fish. The cat doesn't look at you, because here, cats are sacred. They represent Bastet, goddess of fertility and protection. Killing a cat, even by accident, is one of the greatest crimes you could commit. And you almost did, stumbling over one at night. A crowd forms. Eyes fixed on you. Hands wield stones. You barely escape public execution. You learn fast. In Egypt, not everything that meows is cute. Crocodiles, worshipped and feared. You need to cross a Nile tributary. The boatman looks at the dark water and hesitates. Sobek is restless today, he says. You don't understand. Until you see two eyes emerge from the reeds. A 6-meter crocodile slides along the shore, silent as a living shadow. Egyptians worship them, literally. In some cities, they are fed with fine meats, have temples and their own sarcophagi. But in the Nile, they are kings. You row with a racing heart. One mistake, one distraction, and you become part of the divine feast. Hippopotamuses, mass killers. You thought hippos were cute. Here, they are water demons. Heavier than oxen, faster than they seem, hippos kill more Egyptians than wars. They destroy boats, attack villages, trample crops. You see one emerge from the Nile with blood on its teeth. A boy was fishing on the bank. Now only screams and an empty net remain. No one retaliates. The animal represents chaos. It is the physical form of Set, god of the desert and destruction. And whoever fights a god, dies. Scorpions and snakes, the silent killers. You step on a stone. Feel something pierce your leg, it's a scorpion. The pain is immediate, the fever even more. A healer burns resin, sings, but your body already starts shaking. Your bladder lets go. You feel numbness in your face, and you think, it's just an insect. But here these small creatures kill silently, and sometimes they are even revered. Goddess Serket has a scorpion on her head. The venom does not kill the spirit, but it kills the flesh. And you realize the ground was never safe. Cattle and power. You are sent to work in the pens of the temple of Apis, the sacred bull. These animals are not food. They are offerings, alive. You approach a black bull. It roars, a wall of muscle. When you try to lasso it, you are thrown in the air like a sack of straw. The pain in your chest is dull. A broken bone. Maybe more than one. The priests throw you out. Not out of pity, but because you disrespected the animal. Here, even the cattle punish you. Jackals, dogs in the presence of death. At night you hear howls. Not wolves, but jackals. They roam the cemeteries, dig up remains, scatter skulls. You are afraid. But the Egyptians are not. They associate them with Anubis, god of the dead. Killing a jackal may mean attracting curses, but letting them loose means losing tombs, treasures, and even relatives. The solution? Ignore, pray, and hope Anubis is satisfied. You don't sleep. Because you know those golden eyes in the dark are not superstition, creatures that live in you. You feel something move on your skin, a persistent itch on your foot. Then, your arm. A scribe says they are internal snakes. They are actually larvae. Mosquitoes laid eggs in your flesh. You pull one out with a bone needle. There are more. Ticks, lice, bedbugs. You are a living colony, and there is no soap, no ointment, only prayers. The Egyptians' relationship with animals is more than symbolic. They believe every creature carries part of the divine. Killing an animal without necessity is meddling with cosmic balance. But living among these creatures means constant risk. You are not at the top of the